Relationships, too, began to take on new depth as I applied Stoic principles. I realized how often I had placed unspoken expectations on others, only to feel disappointed when they didn't meet them. But Stoicism reminded me that people are who they are, not who I want them to be. Accepting others as they are, flaws and all, brought a sense of peace to my interactions. It didn't mean tolerating harmful behavior, but it did mean letting go of the frustration that came from wishing others would act differently. This acceptance extended to myself. For years I had been my harshest critic, holding myself to impossible standards and berating myself for falling short. But Stoicism taught me the value of self-compassion. Progress, not perfection, became my mantra. Each day I aimed to do a little better than the day before, knowing that the journey toward virtue is a lifelong one. I forgave myself for my mistakes, not to excuse them, but to learn from them and move forward. Another vital aspect of Stoicism is its emphasis on simplicity. In a world that constantly pushes us to want more success, more possessions, more recognition, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. But Stoicism strips life down to its essentials, reminding us that contentment comes not from abundance, but from appreciating what we have. This shift in perspective was transformative. I stopped chasing external markers of success and began focusing on internal fulfillment. The practice of gratitude became central to this mindset. Each morning I made it a habit to reflect on the things I was thankful for. Small, often overlooked blessings like a quiet moment of peace, a kind word from a friend, or the simple pleasure of a good meal. These moments, though fleeting, became the foundation of a richer, more grounded existence. Gratitude shifted my focus from what I lacked to what I already had, and in doing so, it brought a profound sense of contentment. Perhaps one of the most unexpected lessons was the realization that adversity is not an enemy, but an ally. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This idea transformed how I viewed challenges. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, I began to see them as opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Each difficulty became a proving ground, a chance to test and refine the principles I was striving to live by. And in the face of adversity, I found solace in Stoicism's focus on the present moment. So often we dwell on the past or worry about the future, missing the beauty and potential of now. But Stoicism reminded me that the present is all we truly have. Each moment, no matter how ordinary, holds the possibility for joy, growth, and meaning. Embracing this mindset allowed me to savor life's simple pleasures and approach each day with renewed purpose. Through all these lessons, Stoicism became more than a philosophy. It became a way of life, a framework for navigating the complexities of existence with clarity and grace. It didn't promise to eliminate pain or hardship, but it gave me the tools to face them with courage. It reminded me that life's challenges are not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, for they are the very crucible in which character is forged. And as I continued to live by these principles, I found not only strength, but a deep and enduring sense of peace. As the principles of Stoicism continued to weave their way into my daily life, I began to see the world and my place within it with a clarity I had never known before. The philosophy didn't offer a shield against life's storms, but it gave me the tools to weather them. Each challenge became a teacher, each success a moment of gratitude, and each failure an opportunity to grow. One of the most profound lessons was understanding the value of detachment, not in the sense of cold indifference, but in the ability to let go of attachments that held me back. Stoicism doesn't ask you to abandon love, passion, or ambition. Rather, It encourages you to hold these things lightly, to love deeply but without possessiveness, to pursue goals with fervor but without letting the outcome define your worth, to experience joy without the fear of its eventual departure. This shift in perspective was liberating. I no longer clung desperately to the things I couldn't control, relationships, success, or even my health. Instead, I learned to cherish them while they were present and accept their absence when they were gone. Life became less about grasping and more about appreciating. Each moment, fleeting as it might be, was enough. But this wasn't a passive acceptance. Stoicism emphasizes action, purposeful, intentional action rooted in virtue. It teaches that while we can't control the results, we can control our efforts. This idea became a cornerstone of how I approached my days. Whether it was a small task or a monumental goal, I poured my energy into doing it well, not because I expected a specific outcome, but because it was the right thing to do. This approach transformed how I viewed success. It was no longer about accolades, recognition, or external rewards. Success became about integrity, knowing I had acted with honesty, kindness, and diligence, regardless of the outcome. This internal measure of success brought a sense of peace that no external achievement ever could. In relationships, this principle of detachment and action took on new meaning. I began to approach others with a sense of understanding rather than expectation. People are who they are, and their actions are often shaped by experiences and struggles we may never fully understand. Instead of trying to change or control others, I focused on what I could bring to the relationship: patience, empathy, and authenticity. This shift allowed me to love more freely, without the weight of unrealistic expectations. At the same time, Stoicism encouraged me to set boundaries, not out of selfishness, but out of respect for myself. Not every relationship is meant to last, and not every connection is healthy. Walking away from people who drained my energy or compromised my values wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And with each goodbye, I found space to welcome relationships that nurtured growth and mutual respect. Stoicism also reshaped my relationship with time. It taught me that time is our most precious resource, one that slips away with every passing moment. This realization wasn't meant to instill panic, but to inspire intention. I began to ask myself, am I spending my time in alignment with my values? Am I investing it in what truly matters? These questions became a guide, helping me prioritize what brought meaning and joy to my life. This newfound awareness of time also brought a deeper appreciation for the present moment. It's so easy to get caught up in the rush of daily life, to move from one task to the next without pausing to simply be. But Stoicism reminded me that the present is all we truly have. The past is gone, and the future is uncertain. What we do have is now, this very moment, and it holds infinite potential. In embracing the present, I found joy in the smallest of things. A quiet morning with a cup of tea, the laughter of a friend, the feel of the sun on my skin. These moments, though ordinary, became extraordinary when I allowed myself to fully experience them. Gratitude became not just a practice, but a way of being, a lens through which I viewed the world. Another lesson that Stoicism reinforced was the importance of discipline. Life is full of distractions, temptations, and fleeting pleasures that can pull us away from our goals and values. Discipline became the anchor that kept me grounded. It wasn't about rigidity or denying myself joy. It was about making choices that aligned with the person I wanted to be. Whether it was staying consistent with my work, maintaining healthy habits, or practicing kindness in difficult moments, discipline was the thread that wove it all together. And with discipline came resilience. Stoicism teaches that adversity is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These words became a mantra, reminding me that while I couldn't control the waves, I could control how I navigated them. Each challenge became an opportunity to practice resilience, to grow stronger, and to refine my character. One of the most powerful aspects of Stoicism is its emphasis on the interconnectedness of all things. We are not isolated beings, but part of a larger whole. This perspective deepened my sense of responsibility, not just to myself, but to others and the world around me. It encouraged me to act with kindness, not because I expected something in return, but because it was the right thing to do. It reminded me that my actions, no matter how small, could ripple outward and create positive change. In moments of doubt or struggle, I often turned to the Stoic principle of memento mori, remembering that we are mortal. Far from being morbid, this reminder infused my life with urgency and meaning. It pushed me to live fully, to cherish the time I had, and to focus on what truly mattered. It reminded me that life's brevity is not a curse, but a gift, an invitation to make each moment count. At the same time, Stoicism encouraged me to approach others with compassion. People are complex, and their actions often reflect their struggles rather than their true nature. This understanding softened my interactions, replacing judgment with empathy. I learned to forgive more easily, not because it excused bad behavior, but because it freed me from carrying the burden of resentment. The practice of forgiveness was transformative. Holding on to anger or bitterness, I realized, only harmed me. Letting go didn't mean forgetting or condoning. It meant choosing peace over pain. It was a way of reclaiming my power, of refusing to let someone else's actions dictate my emotional state. Perhaps one of the most surprising lessons was the realization that simplicity is a source of joy. In a world that often equates happiness with excess, Stoicism reminded me that less can truly be more. By focusing on what I truly needed and letting go of what I didn't, I found a sense of freedom I hadn't known before. This wasn't just about material possessions, it was about simplifying my thoughts, my priorities, and my desires. Simplicity also extended to how I approached time. Stoicism teaches that time is our most precious resource, and wasting it is one of the greatest mistakes we can make. This realization inspired me to be more intentional with how I spent my days. I stopped filling my schedule with activities that didn't align with my values or bring me joy. Instead, I focused on what mattered most, building meaningful connections, pursuing passions, and taking time to simply be. Through it all, Stoicism remained a steady guide, reminding me that life is not about avoiding pain or seeking constant happiness. It's about living with purpose, acting with virtue, and finding peace in the knowledge that you are doing your best. The storms still came, and the challenges still arose, but they no longer felt overwhelming. I had found my footing, my strength, and my peace, not in the absence of struggle, but in the way I chose to meet it. As the journey continued, Stoicism became more than just a philosophy. It became the lens through which I viewed everything, the silent guide shaping how I responded to the world and how I shaped myself. Each day offered new opportunities to practice its principles, and in doing so, I realized the depth of its wisdom was boundless. What I had thought of as a set of teachings became a way of life, an evolving relationship with my own thoughts, actions, and experiences. One of the most profound lessons was the power of self-mastery. Stoicism teaches that true strength lies not in dominating others or in controlling external circumstances, but in mastering oneself. This meant taming my impulses, recognizing the difference between desires that aligned with my values and those that were fleeting distractions. It required discipline, but it was a discipline that brought freedom, the kind that comes from knowing you are in control of your mind, your choices, and your actions. This self-mastery extended to how I navigated adversity. Life, as the Stoics remind us, is unpredictable. Pain, loss, and disappointment are inevitable. But within these moments lies the opportunity to grow. I began to see adversity not as an enemy, but as a teacher. When challenges arose, I asked myself, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? This perspective didn't eliminate pain, but it softened its edges, transforming it into something meaningful. Resilience, I learned, wasn't about never falling, it was about rising every time I did. Each setback became a chance to refine my character, to practice patience, and to reaffirm my commitment to living a virtuous life. There was a quiet power in this, a steady confidence that no matter what came my way, I could face it with grace. Another cornerstone of Stoicism is its emphasis on purpose. Life is finite, and the time we have is a gift. This truth can be sobering, but it's also a call to action. It pushes us to ask, what am I here to do? What legacy do I want to leave? For me, this meant aligning my actions with my values, focusing on what truly mattered, kindness, growth, and making a positive impact on the lives of others. Purpose became my anchor, grounding me even in the face of uncertainty. As I embraced this sense of purpose, I also found peace in letting go of things I couldn't control. The world is full of chaos, and trying to bend it to my will only led to frustration. But Stoicism reminded me that while I couldn't control external events, I could control my response to them. This distinction brought clarity and calm, freeing me from the endless cycle of worry and regret. It allowed me to focus on what truly mattered, my actions, my choices, and my mindset. Stoicism also deepened my relationship with gratitude. Each day I took time to reflect on the blessings in my life, big and small. The warmth of the sun, the sound of laughter, the chance to learn and grow, these simple moments became sources of immense joy. Gratitude shifted my perspective, reminding me that contentment isn't about having more, but about appreciating what you already have. This practice of gratitude extended to the people in my life. Stoicism taught me to approach relationships with compassion and humility. No one is perfect, and everyone is navigating their own struggles. This understanding softened my interactions, replacing judgment with empathy. I learned to forgive more easily, not for others' sake, but for my own peace of mind. Forgiveness became an act of strength, a way of reclaiming my emotional freedom. Through it all, Stoicism encouraged me to live in the present moment. The past is unchangeable, and the future is uncertain. What we have is now, this fleeting moment, and it is enough. This awareness infused even the simplest activities with meaning. A walk in nature, a heartfelt conversation, or a quiet moment of reflection became opportunities to connect with the richness of life. And perhaps the most important lesson of all was that progress, not perfection, is the goal. Stoicism doesn't demand that you get everything right, or that you never falter. It asks only that you strive to be better each day, that you learn from your mistakes and keep moving forward. This mindset was liberating. It allowed me to embrace my humanity, to accept my imperfections while still striving to grow. As the philosophy became an inseparable part of my life, I realized that Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion or detaching from the world. It's about engaging with life fully, with courage, wisdom, and grace. It's about choosing to act with virtue even when it's difficult, and finding peace in knowing you've done your best. The storms of life didn't stop. They never do. But I no longer feared them. I had learned to navigate the waves, to trust in my ability to endure, and to find meaning in the journey. Stoicism had given me a lifeline, not to escape the challenges of life, but to embrace them, to live with purpose, and to find joy in the process of becoming. And in that, I found not only strength, but a profound and lasting sense of peace. Life has a way of presenting storms so fierce, they seem unrelenting, testing the very fibre of your being. I was caught in one such tempest, drowning in the chaos of indecision, unmet expectations, and self-imposed burdens. The weight of each day felt like an anchor dragging me further into the depths of despair, and just when I thought I might succumb, I found a lighthouse, a glimmer of hope that illuminated the path I hadn't realized I was searching for. It wasn't an immediate revelation. No, the process began with small, almost imperceptible steps. One evening, amidst the wreckage of my thoughts, I stumbled upon the writings of those who had faced life's adversities centuries before me. The words of Stoic philosophers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus felt like a lifeline thrown into the storm. Their wisdom wasn't cloaked in unattainable ideals. It was rooted in the gritty reality of human existence, a reminder that life, no matter how unpredictable, could be met with resilience and clarity. At its core, Stoicism isn't about shutting out the world or numbing yourself to its challenges. It's about facing them head-on with a sense of purpose and acceptance. It teaches that while you can't control the waves, you can learn to master your ship, guiding it with discipline, reason, and virtue. I realized that every moment I had spent resisting the uncontrollable had only deepened my suffering. The breakthrough came when I stopped trying to change the storm and started changing how I navigated it. The first lesson Stoicism taught me was to see each challenge as an opportunity, a chance to refine my character and grow stronger. There's a particular freedom in this perspective, a release from the endless cycle of wishing life were easier. Instead of lamenting the obstacles in my path, I began to embrace them as stepping stones, trusting that each one was sharpening my resolve. I started paying attention to the narrative I told myself. The stories we weave in our minds can be more destructive than the reality we face. When I caught myself spiraling into thoughts of inadequacy or failure, I remembered that suffering often stems from our imagination rather than reality. The mind, if left unchecked, has a way of magnifying fears until they feel insurmountable. But with practice, I learned to challenge those fears, to dissect them with reason, and let them dissipate like shadows at dawn. One of the most transformative ideas was the concept of control. Stoicism divides life into two domains, the things we can control and the things we cannot. It's deceptively simple, but profoundly liberating. I began to ask myself, is this within my power to change? If the answer was no, I let it go, not without effort, but with intention. Instead, I focused on what I could influence, my actions, my choices, my perspective. There's a strength in solitude that I had previously overlooked. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. When I stopped fearing silence, I found clarity in the stillness. It became a space to reflect, to reconnect with my values, and to cultivate an inner peace that no external force could disturb. The Stoics taught me that the opinions of others are fleeting and inconsequential compared to the judgment I pass on myself. This realization gave me the courage to live authentically, to stop bending myself into shapes that might please others but left me fractured. The practice of gratitude became another anchor. It's easy to take for granted the small joys and comforts in life, especially when you're consumed by the pursuit of something greater. But Stoicism reminded me that wealth isn't measured by abundance, but by contentment. Each morning, I began to list the things I was grateful for: a warm meal, a kind gesture, the ability to breathe and move freely. These simple acknowledgements shifted my focus from what I lacked to what I had, and in that shift, I found peace. Life doesn't promise fairness, but it does promise lessons. Every setback, every heartbreak, every failure became a teacher. Stoicism encouraged me to view these moments not as punishments, but as opportunities to build resilience. Pain, though uncomfortable, is a reminder of our humanity. And as Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This idea transformed how I approach difficulties, seeing them as catalysts for growth rather than barriers to success. As I continued this journey, I realized that being virtuous wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about consistency, choosing to do the right thing, even when no one was watching. Virtue is its own reward, a source of inner fulfillment that external validation could never match. It meant being honest with myself, treating others with kindness, and striving to live in harmony with my principles. There's a certain humility in accepting that you don't have all the answers, that life is a constant process of learning and unlearning. The more I embraced this mindset, the less I felt burdened by the need to prove myself. Instead, I became curious, eager to explore new perspectives and grow from each experience. Time, I learned, is our most precious resource. It slips away faster than we realize, and once spent, it can never be reclaimed. Stoicism urged me to be intentional with how I used my time, to invest it in pursuits that align with my values and bring meaning to my life. I stopped chasing fleeting pleasures and started focusing on what truly mattered: relationships, self-improvement, and leaving a positive impact on the world. Through these principles, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. The storms didn't cease, but my ship grew stronger, more capable of weathering the waves. Stoicism didn't just offer me a lifeline, it gave me the tools to navigate life with purpose and grace. And as I continue on this path, I'm reminded that the journey is never over. There's always more to learn, more ways to grow, and more opportunities to live with intention. The journey didn't end there, it only deepened, unfolding like a story that reveals new chapters the more you explore. What began as a simple search for clarity turned into a profound transformation of how I viewed the world and my place in it. Stoicism wasn't just about learning principles, it was about embodying them, about letting them seep into the fabric of daily life until they became second nature. One of the hardest lessons to internalize was that people will come and go, often without warning or explanation. It's easy to get caught up in the pain of loss, to let it consume you, questioning what you could have done differently or why things unfolded the way they did. But Stoicism teaches us that clinging to what is transient only amplifies our suffering. Instead, it's about appreciating the moments we share with others without becoming attached to their permanence. Relationships, like seasons, change and evolve. And while it's natural to feel the sting of departure, it's also an opportunity to reflect on the growth that came from those connections. This principle extended beyond people to the concept of control over external events. I found myself revisiting the idea of accepting what I couldn't change. It wasn't about passive resignation, but about actively choosing where to direct my energy. When something painful happened, be it a failure, rejection, or unexpected hardship, I began asking, what is within my power here? Sometimes the answer was as simple as shifting my perspective. Other times, it meant taking deliberate action to move forward. For example, there were days when my mind felt like a battlefield, overrun with thoughts of inadequacy and self-doubt. On those days, I leaned into the Stoic practice of separating perception from reality. Is this thought true? I would ask myself. More often than not, the answer was no. It was a story I was telling myself, rooted in fear or insecurity rather than fact. By questioning these narratives, I reclaimed my power, refusing to let them dictate my actions or mood. But it wasn't all internal work. Stoicism also encouraged me to re-examine my interactions with others. I used to believe that pleasing people was a form of kindness, a way to build harmony. But the reality is that bending over backward to win approval only erodes your authenticity. I learned to value sincerity over surface-level acceptance. People who truly matter will appreciate you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. This shift brought with it a surprising realization. Most people aren't thinking about you as much as you believe they are. We spend so much energy worrying about what others might think, only to realize that they're often preoccupied with their own lives. This realization wasn't disheartening. It was freeing. It gave me permission to focus on my own growth, rather than seeking validation from the outside world. And yet, this self-focus wasn't about isolation. Stoicism emphasizes the interconnectedness of humanity, the idea that we are all parts of a greater whole. It reminded me to approach others with compassion, to see their flaws not as personal affronts, but as reflections of their own struggles. After all, we're all navigating our own storms, doing the best we can with the tools we have. This perspective softened my interactions, replacing judgment with understanding. Money and material success were other areas where Stoicism challenged my assumptions. I had always believed that financial stability equaled happiness, that accumulating wealth was the ultimate goal. But the more I practiced gratitude for what I already had, the more I realized how little I actually needed to feel content. Stoicism doesn't vilify wealth, but it does warn against making it the centerpiece of your life. True wealth lies in character, relationships, and the ability to find joy in simplicity. There's an old Stoic saying, "You don't need to remember anything if you always tell the truth." This resonated deeply as I began stripping away the facades I'd built to protect myself. Living authentically doesn't mean oversharing or being blunt to the point of insensitivity. It means aligning your words and actions with your core values. It's a quieter, steadier form of integrity that builds trust, both with yourself and others. In embracing this honesty, I found myself letting go of resentment. Stoicism reminded me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. It encouraged me to forgive, not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning hurtful actions. It means refusing to let them continue to harm you. Another cornerstone of Stoic philosophy is the idea that every day is a lesson. Whether it's a good day that brings joy, a bad day that tests your patience, or an in-between day that simply passes by, each one offers something to learn. Viewing life through this lens transformed my relationship with time. I stopped labeling days as wasted or successful based on arbitrary benchmarks. Instead, I asked myself, what did I learn today? Even the smallest insights became meaningful. Through these lessons, I discovered a deeper sense of resilience. Life's difficulties didn't vanish, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Every setback became a chance to practice patience, every conflict an opportunity to exercise empathy, every disappointment a reminder to realign with my values. This resilience wasn't about suppressing emotions or pretending everything was fine. It was about facing challenges with courage and grace, knowing that they were shaping me into someone stronger. And so, each day became a practice in presence. Stoicism teaches that the present moment is all we truly have, yet it's often the hardest to embrace. We spend so much time replaying the past or worrying about the future that we miss the beauty of now. I began carving out moments to simply be, whether it was savoring a quiet morning, engaging in meaningful conversation, or losing myself in a creative pursuit. These moments, fleeting as they were, became the anchors of my life. As the philosophy took root in my heart, I realized that Stoicism isn't about striving for perfection. It's about striving for progress, about recognizing that each step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. It's about living with intention, choosing to act with virtue, and finding peace in the knowledge that you're doing your best. And most importantly, it's about remembering that the journey is the reward, not the destination. Stoicism doesn't hand you a neatly wrapped solution to life's challenges. It doesn't promise ease or comfort, nor does it shield you from pain. Instead, it offers you a compass, a way to navigate the unpredictable terrain of existence with clarity and purpose. As I delved deeper into its teachings, I began to see that the real work lay in applying these principles, not just in understanding them. It was in the small, daily choices where transformation happened, one deliberate action at a time. One of the most profound shifts was learning to detach from outcomes. For much of my life, I measured success by results. Did I achieve what I set out to do? Did things go as planned? This fixation on outcomes bred anxiety, frustration, and a deep sense of inadequacy whenever life veered off course. But Stoicism introduced me to the concept of amor fati, a love of fate. It's not about resignation, but about embracing whatever comes your way, trusting that each twist and turn has its place in the grand design. This mindset was liberating. It didn't mean I stopped setting goals or striving for excellence. It meant I focused on what I could control, my effort, my attitude, and my response. The results, whether favorable or not, became secondary. I learned to take pride in the process, in showing up and giving my best, rather than hinging my happiness on external validation. It was like exhaling after holding my breath for years, finally letting go of the need to control the uncontrollable. In this newfound space of acceptance, I discovered the power of patience. Modern life often conditions us to seek instant gratification, to chase quick fixes and immediate rewards. But Stoicism reminded me that true growth takes time, that the most worthwhile pursuits require endurance and persistence. It was humbling to realize how often I had abandoned efforts prematurely, mistaking delay for failure. Patience became a practice, not a passive waiting, but an active trust in the process. It taught me to weather the waiting with grace, to keep moving forward even when progress felt invisible. This patience extended to how I approached relationships. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. Stoicism doesn't ask you to sever connections, but it does encourage you to surround yourself with those who uplift and inspire you. Toxic relationships, those that drain your energy and compromise your values, are like weights that keep you anchored in place. Walking away isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-respect. But equally important was learning not to judge others too harshly. Stoicism emphasizes the idea that people act based on their understanding of the world, and sometimes that understanding is limited. Rather than taking offense or harboring resentment, I began to practice empathy. When someone wronged me, I reminded myself that their actions were a reflection of their struggles, not my worth. This perspective didn't absolve their behavior, but it allowed me to let go of the anger that would have otherwise consumed me. There was also the matter of fear of failure, rejection, and the unknown. It's a universal experience, this quiet yet relentless voice that whispers doubts and convinces us to stay within the boundaries of comfort. Stoicism helped me see fear not as an enemy, but as a guide. It taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Each time I faced something that scared me, a difficult conversation, a leap of faith, or a moment of vulnerability, I felt my confidence grow. Fear, it turned out, was just a shadow that shrank the closer I moved toward it. In facing fear, I also learned to redefine what it meant to fail. Failure, according to Stoic philosophy, isn't about falling short of a goal. It's about failing to act in alignment with your values. If I tried my best and remained true to my principles, then the outcome, no matter how imperfect, was still a success. This reframing allowed me to take risks without the paralyzing dread of falling flat. It gave me permission to try, to stumble, and to rise again. The more I practiced these principles, the more I realized how much of life is shaped by our thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It's a simple yet profound truth. So often we let external circumstances dictate our mood, our actions, and even our sense of self. But Stoicism reminded me that my mind was my domain, a space I could cultivate with care. I became more mindful of the thoughts I allowed to take root, choosing those that nurtured growth and discarding those that bred negativity. This mental discipline extended to how I approached setbacks. Life is unpredictable, and challenges often arrive uninvited. But rather than viewing these moments as interruptions, Stoicism encouraged me to see them as opportunities to practice resilience. Each setback became a test of character, a chance to apply the principles I had learned. The more I reframed obstacles as stepping stones, the less intimidating they became. They were no longer something to fear, but something to embrace. One of the most surprising lessons was discovering joy in simplicity. Stoicism isn't about denying yourself pleasure. It's about finding it in the right places. I stopped chasing the endless pursuit of more and began appreciating what I already had. A quiet evening, a meaningful conversation, a walk in nature. These simple moments held a richness I had overlooked in my quest for grandeur. Gratitude became a daily practice, not just for the big things, but for the small, ordinary blessings that made life beautiful. And through it all, I kept returning to the idea of virtue. Stoicism teaches that virtue is the highest good, the foundation of a meaningful life. But virtue isn't an abstract ideal. It's lived in the choices we make every day. It's in choosing honesty over deceit, kindness over cruelty, and courage over complacency. It's not about being perfect, but about striving to be better, about aligning your actions with your values, even when it's difficult. Its own rhythm, often testing the very lessons you've worked so hard to internalize. But what I've come to realize is that this is precisely the point. Stoicism isn't about creating a life free of challenges. It's about building a mindset that thrives despite them, that sees each trial as a crucible for growth and each moment as an opportunity to practice what you've learned. One of the most enduring lessons was learning to let go of what others thought of me. For years I had been trapped in the exhausting cycle of trying to meet expectations, both real and imagined. Every action, every decision, every word seemed to carry the weight of judgment. But as I dove deeper into Stoicism, I found freedom in a simple truth. Most people aren't paying as much attention to you as you think. Their focus, like yours, is often inward, preoccupied with their own concerns. This realization wasn't meant to diminish relationships or human connection, but to shift the balance of power. I began to ask myself, whose opinion matters? The answer was clear: my own, as long as it was guided by reason and virtue. This clarity allowed me to act with authenticity rather than out of fear of rejection or disapproval. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but with each choice rooted in self-respect, the grip of external validation weakened. Another cornerstone of Stoicism, and one that continues to shape my daily life, is the idea of focusing on what you can control. It sounds simple, even obvious, but applying it in the chaos of reality is an art. There were countless moments when I found myself tangled in the threads of frustration, whether it was a delayed outcome, someone's harsh words, or even my own mistakes. Each time I returned to this principle. Can I change this? If the answer was yes, I acted. If it was no, I let it go, or at least I tried. It wasn't about apathy, but about redirecting my energy. Rather than wasting hours agonizing over the uncontrollable, I invested that energy in actions that aligned with my values. Sometimes it meant finding creative solutions. Other times it meant accepting things as they were. This acceptance wasn't a defeat. It was a triumph of perspective, a refusal to let external circumstances rule my inner peace. One of the most difficult but rewarding areas to apply this principle was in relationships. People are complex, and their actions often defy logic or expectation. I learned that I couldn't control how others behaved, but I could control how I responded. If someone was unkind or dismissive, I chose not to retaliate or internalize their actions. Instead, I sought to understand, were they acting out of pain, misunderstanding, fear? This approach didn't excuse their behavior, but it softened the sharp edges of my own emotions. I found that responding with calm rather than anger often diffused conflict and preserved my peace. Stoicism also taught me the value of solitude. In a world that often equates being alone with loneliness, I discovered that solitude could be a sanctuary. It became a space for reflection, for reconnecting with my thoughts and recalibrating my priorities. The silence, far from being empty, was full of possibility. It allowed me to listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet truths within myself. In that quiet, I often found gratitude. One of the most powerful practices I embraced was pausing to acknowledge the good in my life, no matter how small. It's easy to overlook the blessings of an ordinary day, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of a friend, the simple pleasure of a meal. But Stoicism reminded me that contentment isn't found in chasing grand achievements or accumulating possessions. It's found in appreciating what's already here. Gratitude became a lens through which I viewed the world, and through it, everything seemed to shift. Problems became less daunting, setbacks less crushing, and even mundane moments held a quiet beauty. It wasn't that life suddenly became easier. It was that my perspective became richer. As I continued on this path, another lesson emerged: the importance of action. Stoicism is not a philosophy of passivity. It doesn't advocate for sitting back and letting life happen to you. Instead, it calls for deliberate, purposeful action. Virtue, after all, is expressed through what we do, not just what we think. This meant making decisions with intention, following through on commitments, and stepping into discomfort when necessary. One of the most challenging areas to apply this was in pursuing goals. The Stoic approach isn't about blind ambition, but about aligning your efforts with your values. I began to ask myself, why am I pursuing this? Does it serve a greater purpose, or is it rooted in ego? These questions brought clarity, stripping away superficial desires and revealing what truly mattered. The result was not only more meaningful goals, but also a deeper sense of fulfillment in working toward them. There were times, of course, when progress felt slow or obstacles seemed insurmountable. In those moments, I turned to the Stoic principle of perseverance. Life is a marathon, not a sprint, and enduring the hard parts is often what sets the foundation for lasting success. Each setback became an opportunity to practice resilience, each delay a chance to cultivate patience. I stopped viewing obstacles as barriers and started seeing them as tests of character. But perseverance wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about finding joy in the journey. Stoicism reminded me that life isn't a series of destinations, but a continuous unfolding. Each day, each moment, was a part of the whole, and treating it with care was essential. This shift allowed me to approach even the mundane tasks with a sense of purpose, knowing that they too contributed to the larger picture. And then there was the lesson of mortality. Far from being morbid, Stoicism's focus on death is a call to live fully. It's a reminder that time is finite, that each moment is precious, and that postponing joy or meaning for someday is a gamble we can't afford. This perspective didn't fill me with fear. It filled me with urgency, a desire to make the most of the life I had. It pushed me to mend relationships, to pursue dreams, and to savor the present. Through all these lessons, Stoicism became not just a philosophy, but a way of life. It grounded me in the chaos, gave me strength in adversity, and illuminated the beauty in simplicity. It didn't remove the challenges, but it gave me the tools to face them with grace. And in doing so, it transformed not just my circumstances, but me. As the journey through Stoicism continued, it became clear that its power wasn't just in grand realizations, but in the quiet, consistent application of its principles to everyday life. The philosophy doesn't demand perfection. Instead, it asks for progress, for the courage to keep striving toward virtue even when the path is unclear or steep. And the more I embraced this, the more I saw how deeply it could reshape the way I lived. One of the subtler yet profound lessons was learning to observe my emotions without being consumed by them. Life brings with it a spectrum of feelings: joy, sorrow, anger, fear, and each one has its place. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress these emotions, but to understand them. I began to treat my emotions like visitors, acknowledging their presence without letting them overstay their welcome. Anger, for instance, would arise, but instead of acting on it impulsively, I would ask, what is this trying to teach me? Is it justified, or is it just my pride reacting? This practice of emotional awareness created space between stimulus and response, a pause where reason could intervene. It wasn't about denying myself the humanity of feeling, but about ensuring those feelings didn't dictate my actions. With time, this pause became second nature, a moment of clarity that allowed me to act in alignment with my values rather than reacting in the heat of the moment. Another profound shift came in how I approached failure. For much of my life, failure had felt like a verdict, a defining moment that stamped my worth. But Stoicism reframed it as something entirely different. A teacher. Each failure became a lesson in resilience, a chance to reflect on what went wrong and how I could grow from it. Instead of fearing failure, I began to see it as a necessary step on the path to improvement. This perspective made me bolder. I stopped hesitating to take risks or pursue challenging goals, knowing that even if I fell short, there would be value in the experience. Failure, I realized, wasn't the opposite of success. It was a part of it, a stepping stone rather than a dead end. This mindset freed me from the paralyzing grip of perfectionism and opened doors I might never have dared to approach before. And yet, Stoicism isn't just about looking inward. It's also about how we relate to the world around us. One of the most humbling realizations was that much of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from the meaning we assign to it. Two people can face the same hardship and respond in entirely different ways. The difference lies in their perception. This idea challenged me to rethink the stories I told myself about the events in my life. When something difficult happened, a rejection, a setback, or a loss, I asked myself, what else could this mean? How can I use this to grow? This wasn't about denying the pain or pretending everything was fine. It was about choosing a narrative that empowered rather than defeated me.